perfected the Quran and you know protected the Quran. Many other books Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Kutub Samawiyat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to other messengers before Muhammad sallam were not protected. So many of them were, adulterated. Many of them were not intact anymore, and we can't even find them. That's one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. And also Al-Quran Al-Kareem, like we know, going proper into, the discussion, which is, what is the essence of reading the Quran Al-Kareem? Why do we have to read the Quran? Why do we need to read the Quran? So the Quran is meant to be read, and one of the reasons the Quran has to be recited is it purifies the heart. It purifies the mindsets of the readers. Allah says in the Quran, Allah said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين. That all you believe, Allah is calling on all the humanity, all mankind in general. Surah Yunus, Allah said, Indeed, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مَوْعِظَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. Indeed, there has come to you a warning from your Lord. وَشِفَاءٌ لِمَا فِي الصُّدُورِ, and a cure for what is in the heart. وَهُدًى, and a guide. وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and a mercy for the believers. So the Quran is a guide, is a cure for the disease of the heart, and it's a guide and it's a mercy to those who believe in the Quran. So reading the Quran, it brings that kind of purification and cleansing of the heart, cleansing of the mind into the heart of the reciters of the Quran. And also the Quran strengthens the memory of the reciters. The Quran is a mu'jiza, is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anyone who recites the Quran and becomes the person of Quran, Ahabullahi wa khasatuh, will be among the people of Allah, will be among the special people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah said, بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم من سورة العنكبوت وما يجحد بآياتنا إلا الظالمون. This Quran, you see, آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم. The Quran is a set of clear revelation preserved in the hearts of those gifted with knowledge. So no one will be reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran, يتدبر بالقرآن, pondering upon the meaning of the Quran, except those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted with knowledge. You see a lot of our old people, I witnessed that. I have people that were aged, and despite their age with the Quran, they still feel like they're still young in terms of their memory. So the Quran is a tool, a mu'jiza from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it strengthens the memories of the reciters or those who memorize the Quran. Allah said, Ayatun Bayyinat, that the Quran is a set of revelation preserved in the heart of what? Of those who are gifted with knowledge. And no one denies the Quran, no one disowns the Quran and does not read the Quran except the stubborn, wrongdoers, those who transgress against the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reading the Quran helps to strengthen memories, right? And Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And certainly we've made the Quran easy to remember. And is there anyone who will be mindful of the Quran? فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. In Surah Al-Qamar, Allah said He has certainly made the Quran easy to remember. So you see, like many of us will think, oh, the Quran is hard to memorize, and the Quran is hard. Reading the Quran with Tajweed and all that is hard, is difficult. But whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ever made it too made it easy for to do it, to do the recitation, to do the hifd. And indeed, this is a very great gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أليس فهل من مدكر. And also the Quran al-Kareem, it's a weapon or is a tool to unify the Muslim ummah. You know, Allah says, وَاعْتَصَمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Then hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and do not disintegrate, and do not be divided. So what is the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In hadith of Zayd bin Arqam, قال خطبنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. Wasallam told them one day, he was talking to them, not him alone, but a group of the Sahaba. He said, ألا وإني تارك فيكم ثقلين. That, behold, I've left amongst you two weighty things, two things that are very heavy and weighty that you have to protect. أحدهما, he said, كتاب الله. The one of them is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هو حبل الله. It's the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran, once we all hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the Quran, we shall be united. You see, we listening to me right now or listening later on, the Quran, regardless of your creed, regardless of where you come from, regardless of the language you speak, regardless of your tribe, everyone comes together when it comes to the Quran. We don't have any other Quran. And that's one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this ummah. Like unlike the non-Muslims, the Christians, they have almost hundreds of different versions of the Bible. But subhanAllah, the Quran is a unifying point for all the Muslims. And that's why Allah said, Huwa hablullahi al-mateen, is the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we all hold on to the Quran and see the Quran as a unifying factor for the rest of all the Muslims, regardless of where they belong to, so we have to keep reading this Quran unless we don't want to forget it. We have to keep protecting this Quran and read it, because the Quran, reading the Quran is like a skill, right? So if you decided to not read the Quran, then you forget about how to read it. You forget how to pronounce the Tajweed, how to pronounce the Makharij. So it's something that should be read, and with that, it's gonna unify the Ummah. And also, Quran, it's a tranquility to the heart. So when we read the Quran, it brings calmness to our heart. It brings serenity to our heart. It brings coolness to our heart. So the Quran is what it brings tranquility and calmness to our heart. So the Quran, whoever reads the Quran, Allah says, ألا الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. That those who believe, right, and whose hearts find comfort in the Quran. Their hearts find comfort in the remembrance of the Quran. So whenever they read the Quran, they find comfort in their heart. And surely, in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your heart find comfort. So your heart is not going to find comfort whenever you are in a turmoil, whenever you are in distress. And that's why we have to inculcate this habit of reading the Quran and trying to teach our kids how to read the Quran. This is a long life tool or gift that we would ever give to them. With the situation of our society today, we have to start from the scratch and try. Even if we couldn't give them anything, we couldn't take them to Disneyland or take them to wherever, give them the gift of the Quran and they will surely remember you after your demise. So the dhikr Allah tatma'innul qulub. And surely in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the heart find comfort. So your heart is going to find comfort in the recitation of the Quran. So we shouldn't leave Quran alone. Whenever we are in the state of distress, things are getting hard, things are becoming difficult, pick the Quran and read the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring calmness and serenity to your heart. And also, the recitation of the Quran and pondering upon its meaning keeps you away from fear and superstition. So those who read the Quran engage with the Quran. They will not fear of anyone, because reading the Quran and pondering upon the meaning of the Quran makes their heart calm and take away any kind of fear or any kind of anxiety away from them. That's why Allah said when He was describing how He did to the Sahaba during the battle of Uhud. ليس هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين ليزدادوا إيمانا مع إيمانهم ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عليما حكيما. Subhanallah, the Sahaba, they were about to encounter, to go to the battle, they were about to meet their enemies. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this, take away the fear of the enemies from them. And they are much certain and much, subhanallah, contented that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be there for them no matter what the situation is on the battlefield. They have this certainty and they have this yaqeen that no one has to be feared other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result, they were able to overcome that temptations of anxiety, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them have that shuja'ah, that courage to face the enemies. So because of that, reading the Quran, and also it comes to our own situation as well. Like, we don't go to wars today, but we have different kind of war. We have war with people, humans, people trying to hurt you, people trying to do this and that to you. And with the Quran, when you read the Quran and ponder the meaning of the Quran, it gives you some kind of reassurance that inna Allah la yudi'u ajra al-muhsinin. Allah doesn't throw away the good deeds of the deeds of the good doers. That's why Allah says, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُم فِي الْأَرْضِ كَمَا اسْتَخْلَفَ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ وَلَا يُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَىٰ لَهُمْ وَلَا يُبَدِّلَنَّهُم مِّن بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا يَعْبُدُونَنِي لَا يُشْرِكُونَ بِي شَيْئًا وَمَنْ كَفَرَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the mu'minun, those who have iman amongst you, the Muslims. That's to say that there's a difference between a Muslim and a mu'min, right? A mu'min has more, has a higher rank than a Muslim. And I said, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ, those who have iman amongst you, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and also what? Engage in good deeds. لَا يَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, Allah said He will certainly make them the successors on earth. Right? كما استخلف الذين من قبل, as He has did with those before them. And the the nations before Muhammad, among those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent message to, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said He will make them the inheritors, the successors of the land. They will be they will triumph against all their enemies. كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم, like He has made those who were before them, He made them successors as well on earth. Right? ولا يمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم ولا يبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. Subhanallah. So Allah said, with our iman, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make us the successors of the land, to inherit the land after the transgressors. And يُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَىٰ لَهُمْ, and Allah will surely establish for them, make it the triumph religion for them, their own faith. Allah will make their deen triumph against all other faith. The faith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ibrahim alayhi salam was the one that named us Muslimun, right? So we will be the ones to win all this battle, and we shall be the ones to triumph against all other religions on earth. The religion Allah has chosen for us, Allah will make it, establish this religion for us on earth. And as وَلَا يُبَدِّلَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ خَوْفٍ أَمْنًا, and Allah will change their fear into security. And you see why we are all in the state of fear today. Go to all the lands of the Muslims, right? Go to all where Muslims are the majority, there is no security. There is fear all over the place. We have ignored the Quran. We have left out the Quran in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and when we do that, He will change their fear to security. And we're gonna talk later on about why is the Quran, even if people are reading it, why is having any effect in the lives of Muslims, right? Allah said, وَلَا يُبَدِّلَنَّهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ خَوْفِ أَمْنًا, and it will change their fear into security. يَعْبُدُونَنِي, right? With the clause that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, right? You focus your worship onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. لا يشركون بشيء. You don't associate any partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of you giving the power to decide the power of the law to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you give precedence to any constitution against the constitution of the Quran. These are also part of shirk. When you think someone is more powerful and you try to heed to the instruction of that person against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is also an act of shirk, right? So in as much we don't associate partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah said it will make us change our fears to security. And Allah said, whoever does not establish what He has said, not worshiping Him alone, not associating partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whoever does this, and Allah said, it is they who will be the rebellious, right? وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَبَعْدَ ذَلِكَ, and those who are rebellious after all this, those who disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are the rebellious, those are the transgressors. فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ, those are the rebellious and the mischief makers. And also lastly, reading the Quran brings strength and joy to you. These are some of the benefits that we might not have discovered in the recitation of the Quran. Allah said in the Quran, Allah said in Surah Al-Imran, Allah said, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. So when reading the Quran, you come across all these verses, it brings this kind of joy and certainty and conviction into your heart. Because Allah said, do not falter, do not grieve, do not feel sad of what is happening to you. The prophets, the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were afflicted with more pains than you were, or you are. Right? So whenever anything comes to you, Allah told the Sahaba, وَلَا تَهِنُوا, do not grieve, do not feel sad. Right? Do not grieve, do not feel sad. وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ, and you shall be the triumph. You shall have the upper hand. You shall, overcome your enemies. In kuntum mu'minin, if truly you are believers. So there's a clause in there that you have to be a believer, a true believer. Submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So reading the Quran and reading these kind of verses, and it's gonna bring this kind of joy and strength into your heart, into your body. Allah said, فَلَا تَهِنُوا وَتَدْعُوا إِلَى السَّلْمِ وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ وَاللَّهُ مَعَكُمْ وَلَنْ يَتِرَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Surah Muhammad. Allah said, فَلَا تَهِنُوا, do not cry, do not feel sad. وَتَدْعُوا إِلَى السَّلْمِ, and call unto peace. This is also talking to the Sahaba, Ridwanullah alayhim ajma'in. Allah said, for you will have the upper hand and Allah is with you. So subhanAllah, Allah is giving them reassurance that if they are with Him, He is with them, and He will never let your good deeds go to waste. So if you see you're reading the Quran or doing all this ibadah, Allah will not waste your good deeds. Allah will not waste all your ibadah. So Quran brings strength and it brings joy to the heart of the reciters. And going to the second question is, how do we recite the Quran then? We have to read the Quran. How do we recite the Quran? This is the main point of contention, right? We have to read the Quran for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-ikhlas. And this is one of the things that's probably missing in the heart of many Muslims today, and why we are still at the bottom, right? People are not doing things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including myself and everyone else. So we should always check our heart, check our intentions before we do anything. That's why whenever you want to read the Quran and do tadabbur bil Quran, you try to find somewhere which is quiet, somewhere where you don't have distractions. You don't just open the Quran when you and your friends are in a picnic, right, and say you're reading the Quran. No, you're gonna get distracted and it's gonna turn to riyah, it's gonna turn to show off, right? So you have to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be in a state of purity, right? You don't just pick the Quran and read it anytime, you don't read the Quran in the restroom, of course, but you have to make sure you read the Quran while in the state of purity, right? Or while in a location which is pure as well. That's why, for women who are doing haid, it's not allowed for them to quote or even read the Quran, right? They can make other adiyat, they can make other adhkar and all that. And also doing isti'adah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, right? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So you have to do this whenever you start reading the Quran. You seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from shaitan, right? To avoid shaitan bringing waswas, into your heart. Sometimes you might start something with good intention, but along the way, shaitan could bring something else into your heart and change your intention. Subhanallah. May Allah save us from this. Right? This is, shirk al-asghar. Salam said one of the things that he fears most for his ummah is shirk al-asghar. People doing things, for the sake of people, doing things for the sake of their husband, for the sake of their friends, for the sake of other people other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So you have to do isti'adah. And not reading the Quran alone, but pondering upon its meaning, right? That is where you get the most benefit of the Quran. And also reading the Quran kama ursil or kama unzil. So you have to read the Quran with tartil. I said, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, and read the Quran as it was revealed. So we have to strive to read the Quran as the Quran was revealed to Sallam. And this is where we have to talk about making mistakes in recitation of the Quran. So there are two types of mistakes when it comes to recitation of the Quran. We have what we call al-lahn al-jali or al-lahn al-khafi, the clear mistakes. Those ones that will definitely change the context of the Quran. Those kind of mistakes that will definitely change the meaning of the Quran. These are called the clear mistake that even someone who's not there or someone, it's going to change the context and the meaning of the Quran in totality. So we should avoid making, this kind of clear mistake. For instance, we want to say, changing one harf, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. You're now saying shirata. Now, instead of saying sirata, the sad, you're saying shirata. You've changed the meaning of that word, and now you're not reading the Quran anymore. You've manipulated the meaning of the Quran, which is haram. So it is haram to engage in lahnu al-jali, very clear and obvious mistakes that's gonna mess up, the context and the meaning of the Quran. You want to avoid this kind of mistakes, right? And this is haram, based on the consensus of the scholars. Even if you are praying your salah, making these kind of obvious mistakes, you shouldn't be praying on your own. You should find an imam to pray behind, right? Or you shouldn't even lead salah because you are not reciting the Quran as it's revealed. And part of the actions of the salah is qira'at al-Quran. Imagine someone who's not able to, fluently able to read Surah al-Fatiha. The person doesn't have salah. Among the wajibat, the arkan al-salah, the arkan al-salah, we call them the pillars of the salah. That if a rak'ah doesn't have that rukn, doesn't have that pillar, that rak'ah is invalid, right? So if you're not able to read Surah al-Fatiha, perfectly or fluently, let's say, you're making those kind of clear mistakes, or you're saying Surat al-Ladina an'amtu, right? An'amtu, you're changing the vowel sound, Dhamma, of Fatha to Dhamma. So it changes the meaning and changes the context of the Quran. Surat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you bestowed your mercy upon, right? Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, the path of those whom you bestowed your mercy upon. But you're not saying Sirat al-Ladina an'amtu alayhim. It means that the path of those whom I've bestowed my mercy upon. Do you own the mercy? You don't own the mercy. Allah owned the mercy. Allah owned the mercy. So changing the Dhamma, right? Changing, the Fatha of An'amta to Dhamma has changed the context and the meaning of the Quran. This is a very clear mistake, right? And it's haram to engage in this. This one is willingly or, he's making that mistakes and he's being corrected over it over and over and he's not willing to change. Then that person is committing a big sin because it's changing the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the second kind of mistake is, we call it اللحن الخفي, the hidden mystics, which, like for instance, not doing gunna, or not doing, حكم ميم, like there's some ahkam in tajweed, for instance, صراط الذين أنعمت, or let me bring one of the ahkam, for instance, الحمد لله رب العالمين, رب العالمين, right? رب العالمين, the Rabb, it has shadda, right? Oh, that's not very closer. Just read the Fatiha and see where you can find a mistake, right? الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم. You see, I'm saying Rahim. This is a kind of mad, right? Which someone has to do, and if someone is not observing it, we call it al-maddu al-aridun lis-sukun. A mad in which you put a sukun onto the last letter of the word because you're stopping on it, right? So for instance, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So the noon on the Alameen is fatha, but because you want to stop on it, you give it sukun because there's a mad, mad al-asli, there's a letter of mad which is wa before the noon. So you have to give it mad, we call it al-mad al-aridun lis-sukun, right? So you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So you see the noon has fatha, but it's converted to noon to sakina. It's converted to sukun, right? Because we want to stop on it. So those kind of mistakes, right? So if you want to stop, on this kind of verse of ayah in the Quran, you don't say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. No, you don't say that. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Those are the kinds of what we call the hidden mystics, right? It's not changing the context of the Quran, but you're not reading the Quran as it should be read. Rasulullah never read the Quran like that. Saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin. You say Maliki Yawmiddin. No. So you have those kind of mystics that doesn't change the context of the Quran, but at the same time it doesn't change the meaning of the Quran, but it's kind of changing, the tonation in which Rasulullah used to read the Quran, and we want to read the Quran as it was revealed to Rasulullah. So hidden mystics are totally discouraged, right? There's a division between the scholars. Some said it's haram, and some said it's just makruh, that someone should avoid it. So regardless of being the clear mistakes or hidden mistakes, you should avoid doing this kind of mistakes, right? Because each of those mistakes are definitely how if you perform or if you engage in any of this kind of group of mistakes, and definitely you're not reading the Quran as Rasulullah read it. You're not reading the Quran as it was revealed to Rasulullah. So we have to try, and that's why we have to learn Tajweed, and that's why we have to learn the proper makharij, right? Like I mentioned earlier, someone is meant to say Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, but rather the person is saying Shirata, right? Shirata is different from what? Is different from Sirata. So you've changed the meaning, you've changed the context of that ayah of the entire. Even sometimes you might even change the context of an entire surah. Subhanallah, So that's so very dangerous, and we should kind of watch over that and try to perfect our recitation in terms of the makharij, right? In terms of the articulations of the alphabet, and as well in terms of observing the rules of tajweed. And what are the rewards for learning the Quran, as someone who's learning the Quran or teaching the Quran? For those who learn the Quran, learning how to read the Quran or learning how to understand the Quran itself, it has a reward. So you don't just do that alone, right? You don't do that. Allah said, "Inna Allah la yudi'u ajra al-muhsinin." Learning to read the Quran is a great good deed. It's a great act of ibadah, and as such, Allah Ta'ala will not waste your effort, right? So trying to learn it, Allah encouraged us to do that. Allah said, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. أليس إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله. The believers, the true believers in Surah Al-Anfal, I said, الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. So trying to read the Quran or even listening to the explanation of the Quran, Allah said, you're a true believer. It shows that you're a true believer, right? وجلت قلوبهم. Their heart trembles whenever the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala is read to them. وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا. And whenever the ayat is read to them, زادتهم إيمانا. Their faith increases. وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. And on to their Lord they trust. They put all their trust on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So doing this, listening to the expansion of the Quran like we are doing right now, or you trying to read the Quran, this is some, the characteristics or the attributes of a true believer. And the hadith of Ummuna Aisha anha, that Rasulullah said, مثل الذي يقرأ القرآن وهو حافظ له وهو حافظ له مع السفرة الكرام البررة، ومثل الذي يقرأ القرآن وهو يتعاهده، right? وهو يتعاهده وهو عليه شديد فله أجران. That the person, such a person, the person who recite the Quran and masters the Quran by heart, like memorize the Quran, recite the Quran and memorize the Quran by heart. So that is why if we try to perfect our recitation, we should try to memorize some of the Quran, or if not memorizing the entire Quran, at least try to memorize a good amount of the Quran in your heart. And Rasulullah said, and this person, right, he memorized the Quran, he recited the Quran, and he masters the Quran by his heart. The Quran is with him, like learning, reading, revising, reading the Quran. Rasulullah said, these people, this category of people, مع السفرة الكرام البررة, will be with the noble righteous scribes on the day of Qiyamah. They will be in the saf of the Malaika, the saf of Salihin. Imagine you on the day of Qiyamah coming out, and you are in the group of the prophets, the groups of the awliya, the wali, the awliya of Allah, the beloved servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine you on the day of Qiyamah being this saf of this category of people. And I said, the people who do this, they will be, they'll be in the scribes, or they'll be in the assembly, right, of the noble righteous people on the day of Qiyamah. And such a person, who is struggling, assert himself to learn the Quran, and it's hard on him, but he doesn't know he's a non-native Arabic speaker. It's hard on him to recite the Quran, but he puts the pressure on himself to learn it, right? And he learn it by heart. He learn the Quran by heart again and recite it with great difficulty. He read the Quran. He struggled, he labored to know how to read the Quran perfectly, right? And he memorized the Quran by heart as well with difficulty. Rasulullah said, this kind of person will have two rewards. They will have the reward of reading the Quran. They will also have the reward of struggling to learn how to read the Quran. So you have double reward if you don't know how to read the Quran but struggling to learn how to read the Quran. What of those who teach the Quran? They are also not left out, right? So those who teach the Quran, Rasulullah said, these people on the day of Qiyamah, that those who teach the Quran, that they are among, the beloved people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. Rasulullah said, the hadith of Abi Hurairah anhu said, Rasulullah said, Ala inna dunya mal'una, that this world is cursed. وَمَلْعُونَةٌ وَمَلْعُونُ مَا فِيهَا, and everything in this heart is also cursed. No. إِلَّا بِذِكْرِ, except for the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? وَمَا وَلَا, and other things that are very close to that. وَعَالِمًا وَمُتَعَلِّمًا, and the person who's a learned person who's learning in the Quran and the person who's learning. And among the things also, there'll be in Jariyah after your demise of after you depart this world is that whoever you've taught the Quran, it's the edge for you to eternity. So pray on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the Quran and to make us benefit from the Quran. أقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر ولكم فاستغفروا إنه غفور رحيم. So pardon me for this, what's it called, my cough. I did have some cough a while ago, so it's still there. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.